Okay, so I am Jan Rail, as I said, with the Forest Preserve District. Excuse me, I used to be with the Forest Preserve, with the Conservation Foundation, and I'm introducing Amanda Arnold from Planet Landscape Perspectives, and I'm going to turn it over to her now. Let me just go to the next screen. It's not sharing. Okay, stop share, and I'll let Amanda take over the screen.
All right. So welcome everyone. I'm kind of sad to see that it's warmer in Maine today than it is here. We're a balmy like 38 degrees and cloudy, and our friend from Maine said it's 50 degrees and beautiful. So, but wherever you are today, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting the Conservation Foundation. I've been involved with the Conservation Foundation for several years now, and I really love the work that they do and just getting people to understand that there's a lot more to what nature has to offer. So thank you all for joining us today. We're going to start by talking about rain gardens and what that means. So let's dive in. See if we're all right. So I always like to preface it by just going through some learning objectives. We're going through the process today. We're going to go through the nuts and bolts and really dive into what rain gardens are, how they work, understanding the function, where they go, and then also making them beautiful. Rain gardens don't have to be a hole in your yard or a soggy place. They don't also have to be just a mess of native plants and craziness that people look and at it and think it's weeds. So there's a lot to go into a rain garden. And really understanding the nuts and bolts is important. It's a little more detailed than just looking at a plant tag and saying, oh, that looks for moisture. There's a lot that goes into rain gardens, but they are so vital for our environment. Everybody who owns a house or has property understands there's soggy places. There's always places that have soggy natures because we regrade, things sink, we have trees taken out. There's always problems in the landscape. And we always look at them as problems. But today I want to talk to you about those as there's never problems in nature. Nature always knows what's going on. So we're going to look at those as solutions and there's opportunities. So there's tons of resources out here, but I picked some of my favorites that I really found important when you're looking at small scale rain gardens or large scale rain gardens. But use your resources, work smarter, not harder. Rain gardens don't have to be this mysterious thing. What soil do I put in? What plants do I use? Where do I put it? There's some great books, and I've listed them here. And I'm sure since we're recording the webinar, you can also view this afterwards. But look at examples. Every rain garden is different. Every rain garden, just like every yard is different, every ecosystem is different. We have microclimates. So look at examples, look at your neighbor's yard, look at case studies. Um, I always love this one as I share with everybody. Utilize others with skill. Your kids can also help. They love digging. They can help you dig and plant and move. So utilize others with skills and make it fun. It doesn't need to be a problem. It needs to be an opportunity. Rain gardens provide this whole other world of opportunities in your garden that are just waiting for you. So I'm going to pull some ideas for some of these books today. These are some of my favorites that I own and I love that provide some really good hands-on examples for your library. So the first thing we're going to look at is identifying the proper location. That seems really silly because it's like, okay, there's a soggy spot in my yard. That's where the rain garden goes. But really, you might shift it around. So looking at collecting as much impervious surface water as possible. Where is the lowest spot in your property? Where is it needing to be directed? So sometimes the soggy place isn't the place to put your rain garden. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it may need to be shifted in order to help the rest of the yard drain properly. So look at where everything is going. Um, Take an umbrella, go outside when it rains. It's really kind of fun to see how the water flows. And we're getting towards those spring rains. So now's the best time. Um, where water drains and where it holds. Where it doesn't hold is also important. That can tell you what's going on underneath the surface in the soil. But always remember, keep it 10 to 15 feet away from your home. That is crucial. We don't want to put water right back into the water table and right back into your sump line. It's really important, even if that lowest place is right next to your home. Think about trees. Where are trees going? Where are utilities going? Where are easements and setbacks? Understanding where all those things are is really important because You can't plant in easements and setbacks. You can't dig holes. You don't want to dig holes in those areas. You want to understand setbacks. Some villages and cities have setback rules of where you can drain and how close to the property line you can drain your water. So you need to be aware of those things. Understanding the soil and your groundwater table is important. If you're near a river, you might have a high groundwater table. Well, I currently am in Naperville. I have about 2.5 feet down, I hit the groundwater table. So but I drain great. My yard drains wonderfully, except for the one side where I have my rain garden. So understanding where your groundwater table is also important. You can find these great resources. Our wonderful county. I know DuPage County. I don't know about other people's counties where everybody's from, but DuPage County has great resources as far as understanding your water table, your soils, your historic soils anyway. So you can look at your local county records to find some of those details and information. And the most important thing to remember about the location is you're looking at your home, and you really need to make sure you consider you're not an island. I know many of you that are tuning into this probably know that already, but remember that water's not only coming from your house and your property and your impervious surfaces, your concrete, your driveway, but it's also coming from your neighbors. I just worked with a client yesterday that I was talking with, and we found out that her backyard is actually draining about 2.75 acres in the suburbs. Now, granted, not all that water is coming to her, but the lay of the land and how it all goes, she's draining like almost 3 acres, and it's amazing. So make sure you kind of understand what's going on in your neighborhood. Are you on the low side of the neighborhood, the high side of the neighborhood? Make sure you understand that you're not an island. So the basics, the goals. What are the goals for our rain garden? This is really important. Obviously, not to have soggy soil is like the most important goal. Where does the water go? But what flowers do you want to achieve with that? What colors? What's the use of the rain garden? And we'll get into that a little bit later. And then obviously, what's the function? Are you really trying to filter the water that goes through and drain it somewhere else? Or are you trying to keep it on site to water? We can talk about that too in a little bit. And then understanding the water levels. The groundwater table, where does that go? Where your surface runoff comes and what your surface cover is. If you have kind of trees and grass and flower beds, the surface water that's coming off of those areas is going to be much less than if you have just lawn. So understanding the roughness of your surface cover and how much water that surface cover is holding as well. So I love this diagram. I use it a lot. It's just a simple diagram showing kind of what happens. You have these beautiful filter strips. You always want to create a border on the side of your rain garden. And understanding the water flow, where it goes. We'll have this planting zone soil mix, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then you have your under retention zone, which is usually your gravel layer or your stone layer. And sometimes you'll have an under drain. That's when you need to have some place for the water to go when it fills up. And sometimes you can just surface drain that, and sometimes you actually want to throw it in a pipe and move it out somewhere else. So we'll talk about that when we get into the construction. So, location. Where are the trees? Are you going to be digging into root systems? That's really important. If you have beautiful trees and older mature trees on your lawn or in your yard, you don't want to dig in the root zone, um, or anywhere near the root zone that you might cause damage. So make sure if you're looking at proximity to your trees, that tree is sucking up a lot of water. So damaging it or making it struggle is not going to be a positive thing for your rain garden. Proximity to other things. Where is it in reference to your downspouts? Where is it in reference to other pervious surfaces? Um, all that fun things is really important, um, to make sure that you're in proximity to things that make sense. Is it where the dog comes out all the time? Probably not a good idea. We talked about utilities and slope. Slope is really important. So slope is, um, looking at a 4% or less, you might want a 4-inch rain garden. 5% to 7%, you're looking at a 6-inch rain garden. 8 to 12, you're looking at an 8-inch rain garden. And when you get greater than 12% slope, you really need to find a different location. The reason why the depths change in your rain garden is because you're getting a higher volume of water. and it's coming at a faster velocity. So by adding those extra inches, you're helping stop the flow. And then we're also going to talk about berms. As you can see kind of on the bottom of the screen, using just the string method is really easy. Take two posts, tie a string between them, stick it on one side of the hill, go down to the other side, and then keep it level in the middle. And then you'll kind of understand what that percent slope is. Go back to your grade school days and, take rise over run and find the slope of your garden to make sure if it works. And you might need to do a berm, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. So, understanding the basics. This I really want to dive into and spend some time on. Soil is essential for rain gardens to function properly. And a lot of people just say, oh, it's a low area. I'm going to stick some plants in there and that's going to be great. But you really need to take the time to get a little scientific and kind of go through the process. So, doing a simple soil infiltration test is really important. Um, you dig a hole. That's as simple as it goes. Watch how fast the water stays, flows, and goes, is what I always like to say. So dig at least an 18-inch deep hole, let it fill it with water, let it completely drain. So sometimes that takes 6 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours. If it's less than six, that's typically pretty functional. If you're in that 18 to 24 hours, you need to try again or really talk about amending soils. Um, Usually, if it's less than six, amending soils is really easy. When you get that 18 to 24, we really got to try again and go for it. Um, so, but refill and record it. So try it twice. I always say two is better than one. So try it twice and fill it up the first time, see what happens. Try it the second time. Um, and the rate of water in the hole divided by the time is your inches per hour. And you can easily use a ruler, stick a ruler in there, a yardstick, and divide by the amount of time. So the rule of thumb there is equal to 0.5 inches per hour. The site will support a rain garden. If it's over than that, the soil needs amended or we need to look at a different location. Or you might need an under drain just to help it flow a little bit better. Um, so just going with that aspect is really doing the scientific part of it. The soil infiltration test is cheap, it's easy. You just grab a shovel and a ruler, and it really is a benefit to understand what's happening. I worked with a client that we literally dug a hole and it didn't even drain in 24 hours. She had some really heavy clay soil. And so understanding that we really needed to dig everything out and start over was really important. Um, because otherwise she wouldn't have had anything that worked in that space. And she kept planting things and things kept dying and she didn't know why. And it was because everything was sitting in water. Um, so understanding that clay can drain is great. Clay can drain. We live in the Midwest. For those of you that don't live in our area, we live in the beautiful state of Illinois, and we have lots of clay. But clay can drain. Any soil type can work. You can work with. So look at how do you compensate that? How do you work with it is really important. Um, and kind of go big or go home. I always like that. You can do it. Clay is a totally viable resource. Rough it up. New construction, we're going to talk about that in a minute. New construction, that's a whole different ballgame. So if you have a newer construction home, usually I tell people within the last 15 years, it's a whole different ballgame on how you do your soil testing. And then compaction. All soil has been compacted over the years, whether by gravity, traffic, machinery. We always have to rough it up a little bit and figure out how that works. All right, so sizing your rain garden. Understanding your goals is really important. What do you want your rain garden to accomplish? Um, Is it just about the water? Is it a location? Is it a high priority location where you're going to be seeing it all the time? So you really want it to look manicured and part of the whole. Or is it really about your soil? Are you trying to get something to grow? So understanding all those things is really important. How do you size your rain garden? Um, are there downspouts being considered? That's really important. Are you adding to that impervious surface and that surface drainage? Understanding how much is drained in this space, and what do you need and want to direct to this space. Just because sometimes people do rain gardens that don't have soggy locations. And that sounds really silly, but you're directing your downspouts there. You might just be trying to drain your surface just a little bit better or keep the water on your own property and being a good steward. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have a soggy space. You may just want to be a good steward and figure out where you want to direct what water. There's really various methods to sizing your rain garden, and we're going to go through those. It can be really complex and detailed. There's a few simple calculations, and I can give you some cheats and tricks to help you how to get there. So here's kind of the detailed. I know this is a lot of words. I know this is only like for many of us, it's like lunchtime. So you're in a food coma and you're looking at this saying, why is she trying to make me read all this? But you don't have to worry about read all this. You can go listen to the recording later and see this again. But this is kind of the detailed way, nuts and bolts of how to do your rain garden. And I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Measure the footprint of your house. What's the square footage, the roof surface of your house? Um, you can basically just do length by width and make it really easy to get your square footage. And then estimate how much area that actually is going to drain to your garden. Most people's gutters are divided in fours. You have four gutters on the corners of your house. Um, Despite if you have little kind of other weird roof lines and things, you might have extra gutters. But most people, we try to divide the house into fourths. So each gutter kind of takes a fourth of the water. So you can kind of guess how much is being taken from your house, even if you have these smaller gutters that also tie in with different roof lines and things like that. Um, Driveway. You can estimate the square footage of your driveway or a section of the road. This is really important. A lot of the roads pitch to our properties, unless you have curbs and drainage ways. If you have no curbs, you're getting part of that road runoff. So knowing that is really important because then you're also going to have salt in the mix. So that's important. Um, Also understanding that if you do have your own driveway, draining into a rain garden, you also need to consider, do you use salt in the wintertime? For those of us that have winter, um, make sure you understand what's going into your rain garden as well. Um, Again, with the driveway, if you have any patio surfaces, and then anything from your neighbors. A lot of times, neighbors' downspouts drain towards the property line because that's the natural swale between the two houses, which makes total sense. So, understanding what's coming from your neighbor's property is important too. Um, as a side note to that, also thinking about what you put on your lawn. Or if you don't use any chemicals on your lawn, what does your neighbor do? Because chemicals can also play a factor into what goes into your rain garden. Once you get through finding all those impervious surfaces, divide this area by 6. Don't tell me why it's 6. That's the rules in the book. But this calculation will actually, it is by 6. It's 1 inch of rain off for the drainage area if the rain garden is 6 inches deep. You can also do it by 8, 10, 12. Um, and you'll get kind of that square feet for the needs of your rain garden. Um, it can be a lot of different things. And so we'll dive into that. So shapes, this is just the basic shapes. You could do circles, you can do kidney shapes. A lot of people do just kind of what I call the amorphous blob, and you can kind of make it whatever you want. Um, Most of the time, rain gardens are circular, oblong, oval, just because you're trying to keep all that water contained kind of in a bowl shape. Um, so this is a beautiful graphic and I love this graphic. So feel free to take a picture with your phone on it, but it just basically gives you the dimensions, what's being done, the square footage, where the downspouts are going, not within 10 feet of the house. It gives you kind of that great kind of, here are the basic rules for your rain garden. And then kind of the square footages that come out of that. They're also great tools. So this is actually from our friends out in New England, the Connecticut and New England homeowners. It's a really great tool, even though it's not for the Midwest. You can use it for your own address. I used my own address, and it's really kind of great because they give you, you find your address, you kind of do, it gives you a calculation for a 1 inch storm, and you can simply calculate the area you're looking at. And it's a really great tool. So they also have some great tips about Rain Gardens 101, sizing, scaling. This is a really great website. So go ahead and use the resources that are out there. I found this to be the most effective. It's actually pretty accurate. This is also a great tool. It's from the Rain Garden Alliance. If you're not familiar with the Rain Garden Alliance, it's also a great program. They have a lot of great case studies that you can look at, but this is a fabulous tool. It gives you, you plug in the surface area down in this side, how many downspouts that you're going to be adding to it, what your soil quality is, whether it's sandy, silty, or clayey, and then kind of what slope you're looking at. And so I just did a basic, with this example, I just did a basic 10 by 10 or 100 square feet. I'm adding one downspout to it. Um, and then the soil quality is clay and my slope is moderate. So it actually is showing me that my garden size needs to be 67 square feet. The depth will be 6 inches. It's going to capture 138 gallons of rainfall per 1 inch event. I'm probably going to need about 29 plants, about 18 inches apart, and it gives me an approximate cost, which is kind of just an average of plant costs. So this is a really fun tool because it also helps you with the plant aspect a little bit. It talks to you about how much rain you're actually capturing, which is really important, and it kind of gives you the kind of the big picture. So utilizing these online tools is really great, to try to give you just a basic starting point of where to start your rain garden. So designing the shape, this is really important as far as understanding the lay of the land, working with the slopes, and obviously can be any free-form shape. I love this picture because it's like, let's go around this tree here. Um, be careful that, again, you're not going to be in the root zones of the tree. I use this example for that reason because this tree is going to get a lot larger. And so you're going to have root growth into the rain garden area. So you might want to move it around a little bit. Protect your trees. It's really important. It's always better to err on the side of caution and go slightly larger than smaller for your rain garden. The calculations are just an estimate. Unless you're really diving into the calculating details of, okay, I know that this much is coming from here and this much is coming from here, and this is the soil cover. You're getting into coefficients, and there's some really great formulas out there if you really want to dive into the math part of it. But really err on the side of caution and go slightly larger. If you're in the Midwest, you know that we have these giant 6 to 8 inch rain events that can be just catastrophic. Your rain garden isn't going to function for those events. Don't build a rain garden for those 8 inch events. But if you want to go beyond the 1 inch event, 2 inch events are very common now in our environment. So if you want to scale for a 2 inch event, that is, you know, double the size, or even increase it by a fourth or a half, is really important to kind of capture those larger events. If you start getting your rain garden too large, you're going to dry it out too much, and then your plants aren't going to do the functions that they need to do or survive. Really fit into the existing landscape style. What is your landscape style? Is it more formal? Is it more informal? Is it kind of something in between? Are you going for that naturalistic style? You really need to fit it in with your existing landscape. It doesn't need to be its own little special rain garden island. Like I said earlier, you're not an island, you're part of a whole system and a whole ecosystem. So making sure you're fitting into that landscape style is really important. And one thing that people totally forget is, how is it going to be viewed? Everybody thinks about the function of the rain garden, what's it doing? But think about the form. Is it going to be viewed from the street? Is it going to be viewed from your home, the driveway? Are you going to be able to walk all around it? You can design it in a way that it's really a multiple side function. So making sure that you can view it from all sides is really kind of interesting because you're not the only one viewing it as well. So consider how it's going to be viewed and where you want to maybe put those accent pieces and kind of those, um, design functions. It is a form. It is a beautiful piece of your landscape, and it doesn't just necessarily need to be, okay, I'm going to dig a hole and put a bunch of plants in it. We can get past that. Rain gardens can be so much more beautiful. All right, so the function, the fun part. Now we're going to dive into the soils. So we've done kind of the soil test, the percolation test. You've filled your hole with water, you've let it fill up, then you wait. Usually I tell people to wait. I usually do a whole day. You want it to really dry out before your next filling up so you can get an accurate measurement. So you filled it up, you found out that, it percolates in about 8 hours or so. You need to amend the soil a little bit. If it's less than 8 hours, we talked about 6 hours. If it's less than 6 hours, you're good to go. Excavate as you need to and go for it. The reason why we say 18 inches is, one, you're going down 6 inches. The reason why we say 18 inches is because that's where your water is going to be held. So you want to know what that whole soil profile is going to be. Um, This is where I dive into the talk about new construction. If your house is less than 15 years old, chances are that the top of your soil is only about 2 to 4 inches of topsoil. So that's really important to understand. The minute you get past that, you're probably looking at fill soil. So that can be anything from local, in our area, local clay or local topsoil clay mix and construction debris. And then when you get past that kind of 8 inch mark into that next 10 inches that we're digging in, you're probably talking about more of the native local soil. So that's why it's really important that you dig that 18 inches and understand your soil profiles. It's really important to know where that lands because your topsoil is going to drain beautifully. That's going to be great. But then when you get into that next layer, you're going to have that compaction construction layer, and then you're going to have the native soils. And so it's always important to understand that profile. If you are in that above 6 hours of drainage, then you're going to want to look at some kind of mix. And you can talk to, I have a soil scientist that's a good friend of mine, and he is constantly reevaluating soil mixtures and what do we put where and what do we put here. Here's just the typical mix. You're going to see a lot of different things out there, but 50 to 60% sand, 20 to 30% topsoil with low clay content, and 20 to 30% compost. Or just simply make it easy and do 30, 30, 30. You really can't go wrong with a balanced mix. Um, if you start getting towards those later numbers, like the close to 18 hours, then you might want to go a little heavier on the sand because you need that water to drain through, hold there, and then dissipate through the clay. Um, so look at those numbers. But I've seen all sorts of mixes. I've had people and experts say that you should do more sand, more topsoil. You really need a balance, and you really need a balance in that upper mixture. Um, Utilize the excavated soil. Regrade it, use it, and assist in the rain garden's form and function. So that can be useful to create kind of a berm effect. That can also be mixed in with some of your soil mix. Native plants love native soils. And so taking all of that out altogether is not always a good idea. So I always tell people it's you fake it. It's a 30 30 30 30. So you want to 30% sand, 30% topsoil, 30% compost, and then you mix in this other 30, which I know makes it 130%, but you mix in some of that 30% of the existing soils. Um, and it just helps you kind of integrate the plants back into that native soil environment. Um, so looking at soil is really important. I love this picture because it shows this beautiful compost soil on top, and then the surrounding area is the existing soil, and you can definitely see the two colors of the engineered soil and then the native soil. So making sure you blend that in a little bit is, I think, is very vital. Um, what's your cover going to be? This is where a lot of experts go back and forth. Is it gravel or mulch? If you are going to be utilizing mulch, understanding that mulch floats. So usually I say use a leaf mulch. It's going to have more of that organic in it. Never use a wood chip mulch. It's going to float every time. So use a leaf mulch. It's got more of those organics in it. It's going to stick to the soil a little bit, and just use a light layer of leaf mulch. You can do that until the plants kind of grow in through the next seasons. If you're going to use gravel, that's a totally viable approach. You can do a decorative gravel on top. Just make sure you're keeping it thin. You want to go in the 1 to 2 inch range. You don't want to go any deeper than that. 1 inch is actually totally great, just enough to cover the surface and make it look really beautiful in between your plants. Um, this is what I love. The traps. What holds moisture? So you need to make sure that when you're excavating for your rain garden, the function of it, that you kind of rough up the soil underneath that 6 inches. You don't want any of these traps to hold water. So you might have a compaction area. You don't want any areas that are going to hold this excessive moisture. Um, so you want to make sure that that gets out of it. The other trap that can hold moisture is if it overflows, where does it go? Um, is it flowing down the surface? Um, where do you want it to go when it needs to overflow? Do you want to hold it there? This one, I love in this picture because it kind of answers all these questions. It shows it kind of flowing a little bit downhill. They probably could have done a slightly larger berm towards the front of screen as you're looking at it. I love when I can't be in person. It's always great to try to explain things on a screen. But you could kind of do a berm at the bottom of that slope there to kind of hold some more of the moisture. You want a little bit of moisture to stay in your rain garden, but you don't want it to go more than 24 hours because then you invite disease and insects. So you might need a little bit of berm on that kind of, I would say, the south side or the lower part of the screen to kind of hold in a little bit of moisture and then have an overflow pipe to handle those larger rains. You also may need reinforcements. It's okay to put select stones in there, especially at downspouts, on slopes. You can get some larger stones and put them in the mix. It's not going to dissipate your absorption rate. It's going to help hold that soil in and really make it make sense. So making sure you can select certain stones to put on those edges to kind of slow down downspouts. Rain chains are perfect for this, so you don't have that force of the downspout coming out when we have those heavy rains and causing erosion. Um, you might want to put a few larger stones right around those outlets of the downspouts, so you don't have that force of erosion. And the rain garden will tell you right away. The minute you have the rain garden installed and you have that first big rain, you're going to see where your erosion problems are, and it's okay. You can take that time then and add stones, add some reinforcements, add some more kind of those loving, thick-rooted native plants to kind of hold those spaces and that erosion. So the fun part of designing for rain gardens is the beauty part. It's what we all look forward to. And I'm sure if any of you have any interest in nature and natives, which I'm sure all of you on this call have, I'm sure you've seen this image before, non-natives and their root systems and natives and what they do. So these plants can handle that water fluctuation. They can go back and forth, but they have root depth that goes way past anything that we can imagine. So you don't have to worry about supplemental watering. So always go for the native plants if you possibly can in your rain gardens. It's really important. You also need to know that we need to get past the wetland edge plants. Um, you need to go for the edge plants. Rain gardens can't handle those really wetland loving plants. Rain gardens aren't supposed to hold water for long, long periods of time. They're supposed to hold water for about 24 hours or less. So you can't put anything in there that's super water loving or it's not going to survive very long. Or you're going to have to be supplementally watering your rain garden, which after the first couple years, you don't ever want to supplementally water your rain garden except in high drought. Um, you can do rain gardens in sun, partial shade, and shade. It is possible to have shade garden rain gardens. You need to be particular about your plantings, but it is possible. Um, a lot of online resources where you can follow sun patterns um, and go from there. So it's really exciting. Think about aesthetics. What do you want it to look like? How much maintenance do you want to put into it is really important. So, what are going? I always bring it back to the goals. What are the goals for your rain garden? It's not just to solve a water problem. You really need to think about what you're trying to achieve with your rain garden. So, we talked about conservation at home at the beginning. There's going to be a great webinar about it next week. I love conservation at home. My house is conservation at home certified, and I loved helping clients certify their homes every time I go to their property. But they have this wonderful brochure, and you can download it off their website about building your own rain garden. And they give you sample rain garden plants so you can start that research process. And I love the varieties here. You can have color, you can have texture. I have some people that have to put rain gardens right next to patios, and they don't necessarily want a bunch of flowery plants because either their son or daughter is allergic to bees. There's some beautiful sedges that we can use, and grasses, and you can really bring out things that don't have that high pollinator factor, but still can be really elegant and beautiful. So there's a large range of items that you can put in your rain garden, but understanding how big they get is important. We've got some really tall ones here. We've got some of my favorites like Queen of the Prairie. Um, we've got beautiful, swamp milkweed and marsh blazing star. All those things have height to them. So as we talked about before, you need to figure out what views your rain garden is going to be at and put high things in the middle if you're going to see it from all sides. Stagger out with lower things. Think about the seasons. Think about what's going to be seen first, what's going to come up. The biggest thing about rain gardens is understanding that a lot of our native plants are shy in the spring. So we do have Jack in the Pulpit mentioned on here, but a lot of your and Columbine, but some of your plants are a little shy in the spring. So making sure you have added features to handle some of those early snow melts or spring rains where all of your plant material is not fully in place. You might have some little erosion difficulties. So making sure you really get a balance of early plants. This has a false Solomon seal, the woodland phlox, all those fun things are um, needed in that environment. Um, and this is the inside of that pamphlet, which is really great. So it kind of gives you the drier zone on the outside and then the wet zone on the inside. So it kind of divides it up into wet and dry. A lot of the edge of your rain garden can be pretty much any native plant that can handle dry situations. So it's a really great pamphlet to look at. Um, one of the things I wanted to show here was this is another pullout from Rain Garden excerpt. Here's a rain garden for sun. And this one I like because it dives into different plant materials. It shows sizes of plant materials and how big they get. So I love this. This is a 12 by 24 feet space. So this adds some blueberries. You can add blueberries and the American cranberry, and you can do some of these other fun plants. One thing that a lot of your rain garden resources, and you'll find this many places, that doesn't address is shrubs and trees. You can put shrubs in your rain garden. Trees, I put on the periphery, or if you have a really soggy area, put it on like the downslope of where your rain garden is. Um, you can do some beautiful things with viburnums and pawpaws, spice bushes, aronia, that's your choke berries. So you can do a lot of fun things with a lot of shrubs, but I don't put any trees near your rain garden unless they're on the downslope. Um, but definitely you can do these beautiful shrubs on the outside of your gardens. I love putting spice bush in rain gardens. It's a beautiful accent piece. It's very unique and structurally beautiful. I also love aronia. It's just one of those fun plants that just kind of does its own thing and has its own shape, and it has very beautiful seasonal interest. So you have things in there even in the wintertime that looks kind of fun. Um, so definitely explore some of those things. Plants, like I said, a lot of the resources you find out there really focus on perennials and grasses, and it kind of shies away from shrubs. But shrubs are a really viable option for a rain garden. This is one of my favorite examples of a rain garden for shade. It really can handle the shade material. You can do a lot of fun things in the shade. And I know for at least the Midwest area, there's rhododendrons on here. Um, I know rhododendrons aren't native, but they really are a nice rain garden plant. For other areas, rain garden or rhododendrons are native for you guys. Winterberry is also a beautiful shrub that you can add to this mix in the shade. And that is something we can do in our area. So think about what you can do shrub wise for your shade garden. There's some really beautiful shrubs that you can add to that mix as well. But yeah, this combines a lot of fun things. You've got common bearberry and coral bells and um, zigzag goldenrod is one of my favorites. If you've never played with zigzag goldenrod, go have at it. It's a really fun native plant. This also talks about viburnums and Fathagia shrubs. So this is a really fun plant palette that you can play with. And there's a lot of fun things you can do with shade. Just understand that if you are doing a shade garden, you are going to be limited to those natives that really have more of a spring interest. So you need to make sure that you balance that out with some accent shrubs for later in the season so you can have some of that fall interest, but a lot of our shade native perennials tend to be on the spring and early summer list with their interest. So just be aware of that. One of my favorite things to do later for a shade garden is your turtle head. It is a fabulous plant for that later in the season, and it just kind of takes over and does its own thing. So explore the plant options and don't be afraid to try things. Um, so, as far as our installation, so you're picking out plants, and we can talk about plants more at the end because I'm sure there's a lot of questions about that. The installation part, how do you pull it all together? You picked out your plants, you're not sure where to put them. Now you're getting into the nuts and bolts of it. So, we're just going to go through this step by step. So excavating, remember to lay out your stakes, understanding the slope. If you do 2 pegs and a string, that's great. Figuring out your shape is really important, making sure you're collecting that area from the surface water from all angles and understanding how big you really need to make that surface. As far as excavating, you want to make the majority of the center 6 inches. In that last 1.5 to 2 feet, you want to slope gently up. So you really have that bottom basin where you can keep those more moisture loving plants, and then on the slopes, you can do those more dry loving plants that can take that seasonal moisture when the rain garden gets full. Be careful to watch out for those erosion areas. You may need to contour the land. You may need to kind of do a more complex basin. I've worked with a couple clients where we've had to do a 2-step basin just because of space. So they only had so much space for the rain garden before they got to the property line. So we actually did a deeper 10-inch basin in the center. Then we did a tier and contoured it up to be a 6-inch basin, and then we sloped up to the side because they needed to hold more water than their space allowed. So ideally, you want to keep the same excavation length all the way across, but sometimes you have to play with the system. So you might need to do a deeper center and then slightly on the outside and then slightly further. Always work smarter, not harder. Um, Use your resources, use your friends and your kids to help you dig, um, but also use the hose and yardstick method. It's really understanding, throw a hose on the ground, watch where the water goes, use a hose, use the yardstick to level things out. The hose and the yardstick can be a great tool. So really understanding the conveyance of where the water is going is important. I always tell people, once you get it excavated, let it rain on it and see where the soil goes. Now, hopefully, it's not like a 6-inch rain and you have erosion everywhere and you have to kind of clean up the mess. But it's really kind of cool to see what happens to the water in that excavated space with no plant material. So, if you have the time to do it, it's really interesting to see how that goes. And you may see that you have more water than you thought. Um, Always bury your pipes and bury your pipes properly. Hopefully, you'll be working with a landscape contractor, but if you're doing it yourself, um, make sure you bury your pipes properly. Make sure you have a great pitch. You want to go above that 1 inch or 1% if possible. In case you get leaves in your downspouts, you want to be greater than 1% so you can really force that water out and keep it flowing. The important thing to remember about buried downspouts, you really want to have a solid pipe from the house at least 10 feet. Whether that's PVC or your black corrugated solid pipe, you need to get it at least 10 feet solid away from the house so you don't have any water flowing back to your house. A wet basement is no fun for anybody. Once you get past that 10 feet zone, then you can make it a perforated pipe. So a lot of people make it a perforated pipe even before it gets to the rain garden. If your goal is to get all the water to the rain garden, which is always my suggestion, then make it a solid pipe all the way to the rain garden and then perforate it under the rain garden. If you can do the whole extent of the rain garden with a perforated pipe underneath, that's ideal. And then let that perforated pipe continue on. You can use that as your outlet pipe and then simply stick it up in the yard or daylight it somewhere else further down. Making sure you get your basin level is really key. You need to keep the side slopes about 60%. You want to get a pretty good pitch. But you want to make sure the bottom is very level. Otherwise, you'll have water standing at one end of the rain garden, and the top of the rain garden will be dry, and those plants in the bottom that need the moisture will suffer. So really make sure that you try to keep that level, that basin level. You always need an overflow solution, even if it's just above surface. So if you have an above surface outlet, fine. If it's going to drain through the rest of your yard, great. If you have a pipe, make sure you have an escape route. It's always important. Um, Soil, make sure you account for the slopes. This is important. I've had people excavate rain gardens and then they fill in 6 inches of soil and then they're like, where did my depression go? So make sure you account for the slopes of the rain garden. So make sure you overdig. Um, and then plant. Make sure the wettest plants go in the center. Your sides can handle that occasional flooding, and then any part of your berm needs to be dry plants. So the key to installing. This is where everybody has the most difficulty. You understand how the rain garden works, you know what you need to achieve, and then when you go to do it, something goes wrong in the process. So take the time to install it correctly. Don't cut corners. Make sure the sides of your rain garden have that pitch. You want a 60% pitch slope, and make sure that basin is level. Those are the keys. That's the most common rain garden fail that I see in residential yards is the basin is not level, they've not amended the soils, and they have no pitch on the sides to hold that water in place. And then finally, enjoy the efforts of your labor. Um, so I want to kind of take the last part of my talk here to talk about management and care. It looks beautiful. You put it in. Now, what do you do? Making sure you mulch and have cover over the first couple of years, whether you do gravel or you do leaf mulch, it's vitally important for those plants to really get established because they're going to be dealing with those water fluctuations. And even though they're native plants and they're built for it, they still need a little bit of help. Plant for overlap and competition. So if you want that rain garden to get started, know that native rain garden plants spread. So understand that they're going to kind of overlap each other, and that's going to be okay. Understand that they're going to compete with each other a little bit too. You might plant 7 varieties of plants, and in 5 years, you only have five. That's okay. That means those plants spread out and kind of took control, and they really enjoyed the competition, and they're the ones that are going to take over that space. So understand if the rain garden doesn't totally keep its shape and design intent, that's okay. Um, Periodically, please check your inlet and outlet for erosion and make sure your slope and level over time is staying the same. Rain gardens fill in. They get debris, they get moisture from other places, they get storm events. So making sure you're keeping that. You might need to excavate a little bit and put some plants back in place. Always remember to clean your downspouts and keep debris out of the rain garden because you want to keep those outlets flowing. Weeding. I'm sorry to say that even if you pick low maintenance, awesome rain garden plants, you will have to weed a little bit. I can't take that away from you. I'm sorry. But plant and plan for it. Plant items that are going to compete with each other and really fill in and take the space. Don't plant items that are going to seed up to the world or going to be creeping and taking over everything. So really be careful with your plant choices. Don't just say, "Oh, I found this great website, it had this sun garden, rain garden, and that's what I'm going to put in my yard." Look at the plants, do some research, take some time because sometimes those plans are great, but they require a lot of maintenance. So really plant for what you can handle. If you're not a maintenance person, then pick 5 or 6 varieties. That way, when you walk out to your rain garden, if you don't see those 5 or 6 varieties, then it's a weed and it's got to come out. So keep it simple for yourself. Don't get over ambitious. Cutting back, spring cutback is always the best. You want to keep some of those things through the winter in case you have snow melt. Plus, keeping the stuff up during winter, I think, is always a beautiful option. My biggest management speech that I give all of my clients is understanding when to ignore, edit, and remove. So sometimes you just have to ignore weeds and they're okay. They'll go away. Plants will outcompete them. Dandelions are a perfect example. People hate dandelions. So do I. But guess what? Those native plants are going to take over in a year and you're not going to see any more dandelions. So if you don't have 20 hours to spend in your garden, ignore the dandelions and focus on some of those other things that really do need to come out, like garlic mustard and thistle and things that are going to cause really big problems in your garden. Know when to edit. If some plant is really starting to take over, pull that out, move it over, move it somewhere else, and then finally removing it. It's really important to remove some things that are going to cause problems. So management is not just about pulling weeds, it's also about playing with the plants in your garden and seeing how they develop over time. One of the biggest things that we forget about rain gardens is we really need to add details. We need to add birdhouses and nesting boxes. We need to add benches for you to enjoy your rain garden and seating areas and hummingbird feeders because birds are going to be attracted and wildlife are going to be attracted to these rain gardens in a positive way. And so we want to add spaces for them to be contained in our yards without becoming nuisances. So be flexible. Be flexible with change, monitor and adapt, and know that your rain garden, the minute you plant it, it's not going to be the same. It's going to change with nature. It's going to take on its own shape and form, and it's going to be a great space for you. So I want to take the last few minutes to say thank you. I love talking about rain gardens. It's a problem that all of us in any type of home share because there's always space where the water goes. So enjoy the spaces that you have. Look for those rain garden opportunities, not problems, and go out there and have fun planting. So I'd love to take some questions since we have a little bit of time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was great. A lot of really useful information. So I'll start with some of the questions. One of the first ones was, is it okay to make a rain garden where it is dry, like a front lawn, but if the roof water drain can be channeled to it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can totally move rain gardens to where you need them to get rid of that roof water. It's okay that it's dry. You are going to want to shy on the more drier side for your plant palette, but that's a perfect location for a rain garden.
Okay. The next question is, how long should you wait between the first filling and the second when digging your test hole?
Try to wait 24 hours if you have the time to do it, or at least pick a warm, hot day and wait 2 to 4 hours so you can get a pretty accurate draining of the hole.
Okay. The next one is about shrubs. Could larger native edibles like pawpaw, aronia, or spice bush make sense in rain gardens?
Yes. Yeah, as I said, probably put your trees on the periphery or downhill of your rain garden where they're going to get the natural drainage water from your rain garden overflow. But shrubs are a beautiful option for rain gardens. I've actually done rain garden design where I've just had grasses and shrubs, and it's been fun and beautiful.
The next question I think I can answer. It says, well, you might be able to too. Do students from CUD or other local colleges work with homeowners to provide guidance and design? And I'll let Amanda answer about the students, but just so you know, the Conservation Foundation, our Conservation at Home program, we come out to your home for free. In DuPage County, Kane Kendall will come out to your home for free and give you advice and guidance on rain gardens and native gardens. But Amanda, take it away with the students.
Yeah, students do. So you can contact the horticulture department, and it depends on who's available. Sometimes we have student interns. I have currently a student intern that works for me, and we basically can come out and help out with some of those things. So yes, students are usually available. If they usually get a lot of requests sometimes, so you may get, but they'll refer you also to a professional or a professional that has a student intern to help out with those things, but students are always willing to come out and figure out what they can do to help.
Great, thank you so much. I didn't know that. That's good to know. It says, where do you get the designing form for the rain gardens? There are a lot of questions. Another one asking about the handouts. How can they get those?
Yeah, you can shoot me an email. My email's down at the bottom, Amanda@planet.land, and I can definitely, I have the PDFs. I can send them right to you as far as some of those handouts and things that you saw. But as far as form, like I said, it's kind of the form of the land, the form of the shape. I usually let nature kind of be my guide. A lot of times you go with kind of what we call the kidney bean shape or the heart shape or jelly bean or whatever you want to call it. But it really can just be a circle. It doesn't have to be anything complex or dynamic. I usually play off the shapes of the existing beds around the foundation. So if you have a very rectilinear landscape, you might want to keep with more of a square shape. And that sounds funny, but you can make a square rain garden. It's true. You might want to round the edges just a little bit, but you can keep it more kind of rectilinear. If you have a landscape that has a lot of scalloped edges, then you may want to go with kind of 2 or 3 curves and make it more of a kidney bean shape or but yeah, the shape is, I kind of play off what's in the existing yard and I play off this kind of the design and scale that's there. It's a hard question to answer.
It is. Um, you've already mentioned the shrubs. Someone's asking about the shrubs you would recommend around the size of a rain garden for Northern Illinois, but I think you've covered that already
Yes.
pretty much.
There's some aronia and ilex. You've got your hollies and spice bush and
Right.
pawpaw. You've got a lot of wonderful things you can put in that area.
So here's a good question. It says, I just moved into my new home. Should I wait a year or two until I get an idea of what my yard is all about? Or is this something I can get going right away?
Oh, that is the best question. If you are a new homeowner, I always tell people to wait a year. I know it's really, really hard. But I have seen time and time again that a year really helps. You see it through the full seasons. I did that in my yard. The only thing I did in my yard when I moved in is I cleared some of the buckthorn out because it's invasive and we got to get rid of it. But other than that, I waited, and it was really hard, especially me as a landscape architect. I was like, I want to get out in my yard and play. Um, but it really helps. It helps to see the full breadth of the seasons. It helps to see those rain events. It's really important because um, I don't know for any of you not in our area, was it last year or the year before? I think it was, we've had a couple 6-inch rain events,
Yeah,
but
big.
we've had some unprecedented rain events in our area in Northern Illinois. And I had people calling me saying, "Oh my gosh, I've never had this much rain in my yard before." And I'm like, "Yes, this was a freak event." But then I go back and ask them a question: Have you always had standing water in your yard? So really understanding what happens in your yard through the entire season is really important. And I have to say rain gardens will not solve those freak rain events. You still may have water
Yeah.
in your basement. You still may have stuff that comes back. You can't ever create a solution unless you put gravel in your entire backyard. It's just not going to happen.
No.
So, but yeah, living in a house for a year is really great to see how you're going to use the space as a family, um, just for design purposes also, but just also how the water goes and the spring melts that we get with the snow, and then the really heavy rain events. It's great.
And this question is sort of related to that. When should we start planning for a rain garden for this year? Are we too late?
No, plan right now. Like Jan mentioned, we have the Conservation Foundation plant sale that's coming up, which is fabulous. You can plan for a rain garden now. Really, the best time to do a rain garden is in the middle of the summer when it's hot and dry, so you don't have to dig in the mud. But you really can plant a rain garden anytime. From you can excavate now. It sounds silly, but even though it's a little muddy out there, you can excavate now, see what happens when we have these heavy spring rains, and then plant in it. Um, one of those pictures I showed you back on one of the slides that was actually taken with water standing. It was one of my colleagues. She had just planted the rain garden in the rain. She actually planted it in the rain because they were on deadlines. They had to get it done. So it can be done anytime. There's no bad time to plant a rain garden. No, if you do it in the summer, when it's hot and dry, so you don't have to play in the mud, you will have to supplement water a little bit at the beginning just to get those plants going.
Right. That's important. So they said the next one is, will a rain garden work for where the sump pump water drains? It's constantly draining even when it's not raining.
Yes. So I do a lot of sump pump rain gardens. So one, I have some people's sump pumps. If you have high groundwater, your sump pump could go on when we haven't had rain in 2 weeks, and that's okay. You are going to have to dig a more extensive rain garden, and you're also going to probably want to line the bottom with a little bit more drainage material because that is a more unusual circumstance. But you could almost have wetland plants in that situation, which would be a different kind of change and channel.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate what Amanda said earlier too in her presentation, that watch the water that's coming from your neighbor's yard and where that flows to, because my neighbor next door, and we have the same issue. Our sump pump runs all season, even if we have a drought. We think there's an underground aquifer, but actually my neighbor next door has it worse because our entire neighborhood drains to his side yard. And literally, when we had a storm in 1996, it was an unprecedented event. It went into their window wells and they got 4 feet of water in their basement. So it was, but he gets the entire neighborhood's water. So and he is always having issues over there. So just watch your neighbors if they're draining to your yard too. It says you mentioned water is to drain through the sand layer and hold there and dissipate through clay. Can you elaborate on the desired drainage conditions within the subsurface? Are we to have the 30-30-30 layer for the top 18 inches and clay below? What about the interim gravel layer? It's a long question.
That's a great question. So yeah, your top layer is always going to be that 30-30-30. You want the plant material to get a good start and be able to handle that fluctuation of water. So that can go the whole 18 inches if you really want to. Most of the time I tell people just excavate that top 6 inches where you're really going to be planting. So most of the time when you're excavating a rain garden, you're actually going to excavate 12 inches. If you're just doing a 6-inch rain garden, you're going to excavate 12 inches. You're going to put that 30-30-30 in the bottom 6 inches and then have the actual drainage of the 6 inches above that airspace. Um, 18 inches down, you're really just going to want to rough up that underlayer. You can put your 6 inches of gravel underneath that if you really have heavy clay. So then you are going down almost that full 18 inches, 6 to 10 to 12. And then the underlayer, I still can encourage people to rough that up if you really have heavy clay. So yes, you can mess with the soil up to 18 inches in that sublayer and really kind of integrate it in. If you're dealing with a really heavy compaction of soil and clay, I would recommend kind of going that deeper level. I've even had people go to 24 inches. It just depends on what that soil looks like. It can be really nasty sometimes.
Yeah.
I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think it did. Someone asked let's see, are culverts good for rain gardens or are they too wet? Sump pump drains into it also.
So if your sump pump drains into your front culvert, like your front drainage ditch or side drainage ditch, so to speak, that's a great space for a rain garden. I would highly recommend a modified rain garden. So I would look more at those shrubs and your sedges and grasses because you're going to have a lot of water force. You're also probably going to get the drainage from the road. So you're going to be dealing with some salt issues or salt runoff in there as well. But culverts are okay. You just need, again, go out when it's raining and spray paint, put flags in where that water really holds all the time. Because there might be some areas, I have an area by my mailbox that the culvert is always kind of squishy, except when we have high drought. So I've planted some like heavier rain garden, almost wetland plants there. But the rest of it, I plant dry plants because the rest of it dries out all the time. So I created that kind of intermix there. So putting stakes where you see that heavy water that doesn't drain within 24 hours, you may need to add some more of those almost wetland loving plants.
And it sort of relates to the question. Someone asked, what do you mean by the hose method? But I think you mean that for laying out the
Laying
garden.
out the hose. Also, honestly, if you have an area that is drier and you are thinking about bringing your downspouts, put a hose on the ground and run it over the bare soil and see where it flows. That also helps. So yeah, the hose can be used for multiple things,
Yeah.
laying out the design, but also just running it over. If you're not sure where your water is actually traveling, follow the raindrop, watch where
Yeah.
it goes.
That's a great tip. Someone asked, oh, where's the rain garden guide on the Conservation Foundation site?
That's for you.
I know. Actually, I've been looking on our site to find it, and I have not been able to find it. So I'll get an answer to that. I'm sorry about that. I'm
Yeah.
looking when we're talking. I'll look for it, but I
I guess
cannot
I
find it
haven't looked
myself.
it up for a while. I just have the PDF. So again, you can email me and I can share that with you because I have the PDF from
Yeah, I
Conservation
even typed
Foundation.
in rain garden brochure, and I can't seem to find it. It must have been taken down. Sorry
It's a
about
great
that.
resource.
It is. And someone again asked about when's the best time to dig for rain garden, but I think like you said, it's any time of year.
Just be prepared to dig in the mud if you go during a more soggy season.
And then someone asked what sides of 60% of what? What is supposed to be 60%?
Oh,
That
so that was going to the slope side. So you want a
right?
60%, you want it pretty steep on the sides
Yeah,
to really contain that water. But don't go more than 60%. I always tell people it's like rolling a ball down a hill or an inclined plane. You're going to want it to fall pretty quickly.
yeah. It's that rise over run calculation that she was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
For whoever that is, let's see, some pump burned out and they traced it where the drain went. I think they're just commenting on the issue they had. It says, do all landscapers do rain gardens or do you need a specialized one?
That is a great question. Not all landscape contractors understand rain gardens, so it's important to educate yourself. There's a lot of great contractors out there, and they are very educated, but some do not. So ask for some of their past examples. Ask for some of their projects. There's some great people that do it out there, but yes, not all are experienced enough to know how to amend the soil. Um, so take your knowledge and use it and help explain it to them. So yes, some contractors are great at it and some have not really ever touched it before. So they just think you dig a hole and put plants in it. So make sure you ask that question and ask for other case studies or projects that they've done.
Okay, great. And this is a question that comes up a lot of times with rain gardens. Do rain gardens help decrease mosquito populations?
Yes. And I say that as long as they drain within 24 hours, they can increase mosquito populations if you don't have them installed properly or if they aren't engineered properly. But yes, because you're adding those native plants to your site, you're bringing those beneficial insects in. And I love talking about that. It's amazing. When I got my property, I took out the buckthorn. I had pretty much a lot of invasives on my property. And the minute I took that, I just planted native shrubs and I started planting a few native plants. It was amazing the way, because I have a creek in my backyard, so I always have mosquitoes. And it was amazing how that decreased almost instantly. So adding native plants to your yard, even basic native plants, can help bring those beneficial insects in and reduce mosquito populations, because then you'll see the bats, and those are great.
Yeah, and yeah, those are interesting to watch. We've had them in our yard. What are the heavier wetland plants that you would suggest for those wet areas? I do have standing water at this time in a culvert.
Heavy wetland plants. So some of your really beautiful heavy wetland plants, if it's in a culvert, you know you're going to have high flows. So I would really try to stick with sedges, because
Yeah.
they're going to be able to hand that matted effect. You can do a few forbs. There are a few beautiful forbs out there that you can do some kind of water loving. Um, your marsh marigold's a nice, beautiful one that I love using that can handle that standing water. But you need something that's got a durable stem, or it's just going to get flattened every time we have those big rains. So I go with sedges because they bounce back.
There's one with a red flower. I can't think of the name of it. It's
Cardinal flower.
yes. I mean, that actually, we've had it in our office, and we had pots left over from plant sale, and we actually just stuck the pot in the water, and it survived all summer.
And it
I mean,
survives.
and
Yes.
it's a beautiful red spiked tall flower. And we actually went to a gentleman's house once, and he said he planted it in one area of the pond, and it ends up growing somewhere else. They sometimes find their own way, but it can tolerate standing water. I mean, once it gets established.
Lobelia, there's two different varieties. You have your great lobelia, which is blue, and you have your red lobelia, which is your cardinal flower. Both of those are very water-loving species. You can do them in a normal rain garden. The cardinal flower and lobelia, I can give you the warning here. Some people have great success with it, some people don't. Also, the warning of it, it goes where it wants to. So if you plant it in one area, chances are it's not going to stay there very long, but it'll go where it's happy. So I plant it in one area, it's now in a totally other area, but it's happy and it's growing. So just be aware that lobelia likes to migrate and it moves around where it wants to go.
Yeah, that's what I have found out
Yep.
too. They find their own place there, and they find where they're happy, and that's
Yep.
where
And it may not be where you plant it.
Right, exactly. Just be ready for that. And also, Jill Ziegler put a link there, and actually I clicked on it. It is the PDF
Oh, perfect.
of the Conservation Foundation brochure. So, and I can copy that and send it in the chat too, but I checked the link out. It's okay. It goes right to that site, and I'll put it in the chat. And someone else comments that the cardinal flower is short-lived and needs the seed because, yeah. So, but it is a pretty flower, but may not last long. And I think that's the last.
Beautiful.
Oh, someone did ask, should whole drain tests be done after a certain number of non-rainy days?
That is a good question. Like, when do you do it? Do you do it now when the ground's still moisture saturated? I usually like to have at least 2 to 3 days before the next rain event. So the soil, if you have 2 days where it's dried out, at least 2 days where you've had enough heat and sun to dry out the soil. If you dig down 18 inches and you see a lot of moisture in the bottom of the hole, you're probably not going to get a good accurate reading. So that is a great question. I forgot to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah. And with that, I know we're over the time, and I appreciate you staying on a little longer.
Yes,
We've
thank you
gone
all.
on. So that's, I said it's a haven for hummingbirds too.
Yes.
So with that, and someone did type that Jim's out until June. Actually, his response, he's actually not out till June. I think he didn't change it on his settings, so he will be back in a week or so. He's enjoying some vacation time out of the office. So anyway, he will get back to you. So anyway, with that, I want to thank you. Thank you again for DuPage County, yes, DuPage County Stormwater Management for hosting us. And you were the great presentation, Amanda. Really appreciate it. And we will be sending, we'll be sending this recording out to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.